Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jackie, and I'm a social worker working at the Act to End Racism Network. And my colleague Ru is also here. And later on, we will be introducing a little bit about what our network is about on anti-racism and what we can do to address racism when we see it.
Thank you. I'm Ru. I'm also a social worker, and then I'm the community education and support lead Act to End Racism. This is a national collaboration address the increase of racism due to COVID-19. We want to advocate for equity, inclusion, and social justice.
Of the 11 strategies that Dr. Ishiyama from the UBC suggested, quotes about what we can say, whether you are the victim or you are a witness in that process. And so maybe we can first go to the first category, and it would be about assertive interruption. Which one you would think is more relevant or more resonating with you? So maybe I can also sharing my thoughts and then invite another person to share their thoughts. Okay, for me, I would pick, excuse me, but what did you say? Because sometimes we are very quick to judge or quick to assume that people are meaning something that they may not necessarily think that way. And I think for me, I would really want to seek clarification on what people say when they say something that I don't think is appropriate. And so that is, I think, a good strategy for me to bring up when something that I don't feel comfortable happen. And what about Tiffany?
Okay. I would say the one that starts with, I don't mean to be rude to interrupt you, but could we reflect on what you just said? I think that one is also like yours, where you first say, excuse me, or not to be like rude necessarily, but also the take a moment to reflect on what you just said, because somebody who makes a comment, they might not actually realize that what they're saying is hurtful, but for you as like a bystander, take a moment and realize what you just said.
Thank you. Maybe you can invite somebody to share their thoughts.
Okay, Joey.
I usually won't like if I ever put in a situation where someone like makes a racist comment or something, I usually just keep my response short and sweet. I might go for the whole stop it or something, just to like, just give them some quick indication that I just don't approve of their behavior.
That's also a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Gabe?
So of the options listed, I think one of the ones that Tiffany pointed out that could we stop for a moment and look at what's being said here, to me, that comes off as the most useful, because that puts the offensive remark directly under scrutiny without necessarily presuming it is offensive or inoffensive automatically. So that would put the topic directly in discussion without necessarily gearing the discussion into any one way off a bat.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback.
All right. Michael, go up.
So the one I like the most here is the can I share my observation with you, because it's not as direct. You're not, it doesn't seem aggressive. You're not being rude. You're just kind of like pointing something out, I think that's the one I'd be most likely to use, at least.
Great. Thank you.
I guess for me, I'd probably use sorry to interrupt you, but, and then continue on, just because personally I'm not very assertive as a person, but also they might not mean to say what they did, or they might not have thought of it, like how Tiffany was saying earlier.
Great. Thank you all very much for your comment. Another category or strategy that we can use, but this is more about like expressing yourself emotionally. Which sentence is more relating to them?
Yeah, so I think the second last one, how it says, can we be careful not to stereotype from other cultures? And I feel like that's very prevalent today in our society, how they stereotype, and that sticks along with a lot of people. And even just like with Asian culture, I feel like that's super common for stereotypes. I mentioned that being like yeah, these things may not be true, so you should be cautious about this.
Have you encountered something like this, or have you heard some of your friends experiencing this kind of stereotypes?
Yeah, definitely. Some examples would be like, oh, Asians have smaller eyes, or they're good at math, you know. I don't know. Just stuff like that. It may seem funny, but it could actually be very hurtful to some people. So.
Right. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, again, it's the one. If I were you, I would be embarrassed to have said something like that, even if you didn't mean it. Again, it just really drives the point home. You know, it's saying this isn't okay. You should be embarrassed for yourself. You shouldn't do this kind of thing. More confrontational, and I think it would really get the point.
Great. Thank you.
Joe, you can go next.
Okay, so for me, I've kind of gone back to the whole. I mean, for me, this is also kind of the whole like get my thoughts across quickly. I might just go for the whole. I don't like what I'm hearing, because that shows that I'd rather be hearing, I guess, more positivity rather than anything negative they could be saying instead.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I guess for me, it would be the top quote on the second column that says, "I don't feel comfortable to hear racial jokes like this." I guess it kind of just tells the person who's saying it actually does affect someone that is hearing it, instead of just thinking that it's just a random joke and it doesn't really mean anything.
Right. Sometimes people say it, they don't really know that it may be interpreted in a different way, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'll pass it on to Gabe.
Okay, so of a very subjective view here, since these are personalized emotions, I would probably just go with, honestly, I am shocked to hear you say this. To me, that statement's the most direct. It gets the emotion right out, the emotion, the effect of whatever comment might be said here. The other ones, like, I would be embarrassed to have said anything if I wouldn't have said it, or I've known you as a compassionate person. Those other ones come off a little bit too context dependent for me, if that makes sense.
Great.
So yeah.
So maybe I'll also share it then.
Okay.
And I can really relate to many of what you have already mentioned. And when you talk about like stereotypes, I was a memory of when I told my friends that my name is Jackie. They think that, oh, Jackie Chan, oh, you're from Hong Kong, and that's how like the whole conversation starts. And back then I thought it wasn't really like anything problematic, or like I find it interesting to engage people in this way. But yeah, so sometimes it may become like a more stereotypical thing. And as for me, in terms of all these phrases, I would probably pick, I wonder how those people would feel if they heard you say this. The reason is, I think that is an entry point where we can really invite them to understand how people may understand the same thing differently. Maybe they want to make a joke, or they want to make it fun, but sometimes there are other interpretations, right? And so like this is kind of my understanding of how we can make use of these sentences. So let's move on to maybe a few more exercise, then we can also talk about some other stuff. But on this one, it is mostly just directly addressing that this is not okay. This is what you've said or what you've mentioned is problematic. And so again, we can also share what we think these sentences would be appropriate or usable for us in our daily lives.
Can I go first?
Sure.
All right, so of those, the most useful to me immediately sticks out as, it sounds like a racist remark. Do you mean it? Like those, following up with a statement and then a question comes off as a lot more useful to me, and especially compared to some of these other ones toward the bottom, which come off as a little bit wordier to me. That one of all the offered phrases comes off to me as the most concise, comes off to me as the most useful in terms of like directly just calling it racist.
Great.
Right?
Thank you.
Allison.
I guess for me, the statement that kind of would be the most useful is, I'm sure you didn't mean it, but it sounds like an unfair statement to me. And then that could lead on to a conversation of what I think and what they meant, because it kind of just leads into something else, and maybe I understood it wrong or they meant to say something completely different. I guess I'll pass it on to Tiffany.
Okay. I think the last one in the first column says you might not mean to sound like a racist, and then you tell them that it could possibly be a racist remark against somebody, because even though it might be against different culture, you don't know if it's possibly rude or not. So it's good to inform the other person, to let them know that it might not be okay to say that. You should know. Just never say it again.
Right. Thank you.
I'd go with maybe you don't mean it, but it sounds like you're making a pretty strong judgment, because like sometimes I hear people make statements that just comes off as like they venomously hate something, or like they have like a strong, I guess, bias or stigma towards something, and I'd just be like, sometimes I might be like, maybe they're passionate enough and they don't just feel like, clarifying every second, but at the same time, like sometimes it sounds really bold at times. I might, in those circumstances, I would step in and just clarify with them, like, hey, do you really mean it this way, or do you mean it some other way?
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, you want to go, Michael?
I agree with Gabe. He says this one, it sounds like a racist remark. Do you mean it? Again, exactly for the reasons he said. It's nice and concise, and it's calling it out. It isn't too wordy, and it isn't around the point, and I think that's really important here. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So for me, I think I would also pick what Joey has picked by saying maybe you don't mean it, but it sounds like you are making a pretty strong judgment. And I think that is sharing with the person how people would see it, and also just to seek clarification again, like, are you generalizing something, or like that statement sounds very strong and that statement sounds maybe unfair to some extent. So just pointing it out, I think, is very important. So let's move on. So this one is, again, also very short and sweet. Maybe we can also look into like what these statements speak to us.
I'll bite the bullet again. So again, of the proffered options here, a lot of them come off, especially on the second column, as a lot wordier. I can't really see a lot of these coming up in a casual conversation. So for the purposes of envisioning this in a conversation, I would go with something like speak for yourself, or can you speak for yourself and not for others? That second one comes off as a little bit more useful to me, but it also comes off as a very strong exclamation of disagreement to me.
Mm-mm. Great.
All the others, a lot of the casual ones, I suppose, are fine, but a lot of the others, like, personally, I have to say to you, I disagree. I can't see that ever being used in a casual conversation.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Okay. For this one, I think I'd also be direct. I wouldn't put a whole bunch of nice stuff, because if they're being racist, and if you disagree, then you just gotta straight up say that I disagree, or I don't think, or I don't support what you're saying on that. So I think you should just be straight up if somebody's being rude or saying racist remarks. I'll pass it on to Allison.
This one, I kind of agree with Tiffany in that if it is a very blunt racist remark, I would say I disagree to the person, just because it's kind of concise and it gets straight to the point. And I agree with Gabe and some of them that in casual conversation, some of these phrases might not come up, or you might not even think of them.
True. Thank you.
Michael?
The one I think I don't know why exactly it stands out to me, but I feel like this is just the one that I would actually use in conversation, and that would be the one that says, "That's ridiculous. I can't support that." And it's nice and concise, and it brings out the point, and I feel like I'd actually use it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes it's important to really confront them and show your stance on some of the statements that people make.
I would probably say like don't include me on this because like usually whenever I see like a racist person, they're usually trying to like get like their opinion out, trying to like I guess almost kind of like they're trying to start some sort of movement. And I would say that because like if they see someone they disagree with, they would want to like get into a huge quarrel with each other and try to like get them to change their mind and like get me to support whatever it is they're doing. And so I would just say that as a way of just, just please get out. I don't want to deal with it. Just
Nice. Yeah, for me, I would pick the third one, just directly saying, no, that's not true. And then give my reasoning of like what I think is problematic on what they are saying. And so, yeah, I really agree with what you all have already mentioned. Sometimes you just need to stand firmly on what you believe and tell the others that that's not okay. And so I think due to the time, maybe we can think the 9th strategy would be quite good because it's something different from what we have already discussed. So there are many more, but I think we can just skip some of them. And so the 9th one is about what we can say when we were not the person that being affected, but we are standing with the victim. And these are things that we can say to that person being affected. And when we encounter that as a witness or as a bystander, what can we say?
if I could start, I would just go with how are you feeling, because it's like because it kind of just I would think it sets the tone. It makes you, it kind of gives the victim the indication that you're checking in on them, you witness what happened, and you just want to see like how they handle the situation themselves, like how they feel about it. Because a lot of the later ones, like some of the wordier ones, seem like they would come up later in the discussion after they share how they feel. It's not really something that I would start with when I approach them. I would just go with a more general, quicker introduction. So I would say, how are you feeling?
Good. Thank you.
Tiffany?
Okay, so first off, I'd say something like, you're not alone, letting them know that they're not the only person that's going through the situation, and you should let them know that you're also there for them to help them out. And then maybe like include it with like one of the later quotes saying that the person who was racist, like, they're wrong. You shouldn't believe what they're saying. You should be treated with respect.
Thank you. Yeah, I also agree that like letting people know that they're not facing alone is very powerful at those moments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pass it on to Michael.
My favorite one is the second last one. I just feel like it's a very comforting statement. Just to it shows what side you're on. It shows that what they did is not okay, and that the person who got offended who is the victim actually like lets them know that they are the victim and they aren't wrong and things like that.
Thank you.
Could I pass it to Gabe?
Happily. So again, what I would say here would kind of depend on context for me. And there's two specific contexts I like to think of when I see these questions. One in which the racist remark has very obviously affected the victim, and another type of reaction where the victim or the doesn't seem to be affected, or is just, say, casually playing off a racist remark. Since those kinds of outer emotions and what they're presenting outwardly, that would definitely change what I would say to them to begin with. So in the case of the latter, I would probably go say with like, I'm upset, how about you? Or, excuse me, but what she said was quite hurtful. That kind of just seems to be a little bit more of a casual thing to me. Like, it's not necessarily overly comforting or overly dramatic. In those kinds of scenarios, I think something like that would work. Now, when it comes to the victim being in very obvious emotional distress because of a statement, I would just go with, what Michael said. How are you feeling, or how are you? I can actually say with experience those 3 words, how are you? They're useful not just in comforting victims of racism. They're useful in comforting people who are just going through stress or anxiety in general. I've had people who pull me out from very dark places just by starting a conversation with those 3 words. So I think that would be a very gentle, objective way to reach to those victims. Some of the statements I actually don't like from this are, that must have offended or annoyed you, or if I were you, I would be really very upset. To me, that kind of implies you're forcing or assuming a certain reaction on the victim's point of view.
I totally agree. Yep, thank you.
I guess for me, if I were approaching someone, I would ask them, are you all right? Just because it's kind of an easy way to start a conversation with someone. I guess some of the later quotes, like some of the quotes I would maybe use later in the conversation, kind of depends on the context.
Great, thank you. Maybe I'll also share that. For me, I would probably pick the 3rd one. Shall I come with you? Not exactly like to revenge, but maybe like the first question is really to let that person know that you are there with her or him, and you are like allowing him or her to think about what he would want to do or she would want to do. Just being there is already like very important. And I also agree with what many of you have already shared, that letting that person know that he's not alone in that situation goes a long way. And so thank you all again for like doing this exercise with us to share about what you think. So move on to like the next part. We can all do when we see different things on the street. And these are some of the tips that we would like to encourage everyone to think about. For example, taking some more training on being a bystander. There are actually some free resources, especially during COVID-19, on like addressing racism as a bystander. But at the same time, when we are a bystander or when we see something happening, we as a witness is very crucial, as we have already shared, that to be there with the victim is already like super important. And sometimes it's also important to really take note of what is happening, to document it by maybe taking a video or taking a picture, keep an evidence on what is happening and really talk about it when the chance arrives. And so to the next slide, to talk about actually for Act to End Racism, we have an online and a text service where we can invite and encourage everyone to speak about and report some of the racist incident we see. And by gathering some of those information, we would be able to advocate for more anti-racism education and bring awareness to like this issue. And so if you type that phone number through texting, or if you go to our website on Act to End Racism /racist report, then you will be encouraged to share what you see, maybe as a witness or as a bystander. And there are like different languages available for different communities, from Chinese to Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean, Tagalog, etc., and French. And so allow people to share what they think and what they see. And can we go to the next slide? So on top of what we are hoping people would reach out to us, we have also developed some of the teaching materials. As you can see on the slide now, that there are different comics that talk about some of the scenarios that we have just mentioned. For example, if we go to a supermarket to do groceries, we may hear something, and then this cartoon is depicting that picture and hoping that we can tell others what they can do when they have those experiences. There are also YouTube videos that we have produced. Next slide, please. And then this is another one that is a school setting, where when there are people talking about different racist remarks, these is what people can do when they see it. And so these are some of the materials that we have created in the past, and we would really want to have your input as well in terms of talk about it in a more like friendly fashion. So next slide. And so on top of the cartoons and comics, we have also created some infographic on different topics. For example, this one is about implicit biases, and we have also tried to make it more informative by having different research and data to support it, and at the same time make it not as like a very lengthy, boring way. Things that we are thinking about sharing with not just students but also parents and educators, just to help them think about what they can talk when they see something like this occurring. And next slide. Yep, and so this is another example. And so like what I've just shown you is on something that we have prepared in terms of materials, what we can use to address racism. And I think for the remaining time, we would really hope to have your thoughts and input on your personal experience when you talk to friends and you are in your family. What are some of the good promotion or channels that we can use to really address these kind of issues? So these are some of the questions that we would really like to consult you all, because we are hoping to engage young people and also parents, and it would be great to have your thoughts, share your experience about like what are some of the effective ways. We are thinking maybe Instagram posts, maybe Facebook, and some other channels. So it would be great to have you all like share a little bit about what you think is helpful. So any comment would be welcome and appreciated.
I'd say one thing, one technique, not necessarily the strongest or the most effective, but one thing I think would be very effective, especially in a video format, to actually show racist incidents, to show people what's actually going on, what it looks like, and how to properly combat it when you see it. That's why I would emphasize stuff for the second question, stuff like social media and videos and stuff like that comes across as snippets of life. I'm not sure how many people, adults or children, will be stopping by the time to read newspapers or a poster up on a lamppost or a radio advertisement on this sort of thing. But if you get it in a medium that's widespread today, and as well as get a certain message in that direct statement, I think that would be a very good step to disseminating that information.
Do you mind sharing a little bit more on like when you talk about a video, what content should it include?
Well, when I say racist incidents, I don't necessarily mean like Eric Gardner or, any of that stuff. But what I think would be vital to include would be like everyday instances of slurs being thrown or harassment on the bus, like snippets of video evidence we have of racism in a very casual, identifiable environment.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Joey?
Say for me, I would say one way we could do it, like to spread anti-racism to students and parents, is just get people talking about it like in class or in the workplace. So like for students, like there could be more classes about racism. There could be part of like a social studies topic, like talk about racism in the past and how it still affects in the present. I know when I was in high school, we talked about like Martin Luther King Jr. And so we could continue to use him as an example as among other figures that fought against racism in class. And I think for the workplace, people could there could be like a meeting between employees about like how to improve the workplace, and they could bring up racism as a topic, and then they could ask all the employees if they've dealt with racism at all in the workplace, like if there's a specific employee that gives everyone else a hard time or not, and think about what can be done to help improve it, for future generations to prosper in that.
Thank you.
Allison?
So I guess I kind of agree with Joey in that for like students, I guess one way of the message out there is learning it in class. I know for me personally, in one of my classes, we went over like racism that's in the industry that I'm going into, which is accounting, and how that still exists today. The best way would be social media and having like short infographics similar to what you made already, but just less wordy if that's possible.
Definitely. Thank you.
Michael?
Call me old-fashioned for this, but I really like the newspapers and the posters idea. It feels like a lot of the time when I'm on social media or whatever, I'm just scrolling through posts, not really paying attention. But if I'm out somewhere and there's a bright poster or something, then I'm a lot more likely to notice and pay attention to that. Same with a newspaper article, I just feel like that would really catch my eye and get a lot of people to notice. Tiffany then, sorry.
That's okay. The most effective way, I think, most currently would be social media. I know, especially on Instagram and Facebook, there's a lot of videos going around, especially these past months with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. There's been a lot of videos and a lot of change that's been happening. That's really good. Also, yeah, I agree on what Joey said, I think, for students in class during school, just to inform them at a younger age, because a lot of bullying does happen in the school. So it's good to let them know and inform them that this is an actual situation that's going on and how to prevent this.
Can you also share a bit about what you have seen during the Black Lives Matter movement? I mean, like for the past few months, like where do you get the information, and did you participate in some of the rallies and stuff, or what your friends would talk about when they see those movements?
Right. Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of posts going around, and a lot of my friends repost it and let others know. Also, especially like spreading awareness, I feel like that's the most important, is getting yourself educated on the actual situation and the issues that are going on, because you don't want to just say that, oh, I'm not racist, because you want to actually be moving towards change and maybe like donating towards charities that help. And yeah, videos that go around in the world, it actually opens your eyes to real life situations and doesn't cause you to just scroll past, this is actually something that's happening.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's comments about like how we can really spread the words, and I'm sure like we have all in some way heard of or experienced your feedback are very helpful in terms of what we can do next. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for participating. I know like this is pretty late, and at the same time we really treasure your comments about like how we can really engage different groups of people in the future. And we are really hoping that maybe in the coming few weeks or few days, or in the future, like whatever we are doing, we can have a chance to work together to spread the words, and maybe just to be a good ally when we see something like this happening around us. So thank you all again, and yeah, we look forward to like knowing more about what your thoughts are like after this conversation. And yeah, feel free to let us know how we can also help you in really talking about this with your friends and families in the future.
Good.
So,
Thanks.
thank you all once again. Have a good evening.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.